I've heard they don't have toothpaste. They're not able to sleep. There are hundreds together. Can you paint a picture of what you learned about what's happening to children in these migrant centers right now?
Yes. Well, the first thing we saw was the significant number of children in this Border Patrol station. So this station had a capacity of 104, and we immediately were given the roster and saw that there were over 350 children at this adult detention center, and we were horrified. Then we scanned the ages on the list, and it was 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They were infants, toddlers, preschoolers, school-age children, and we realized that we had a real problem here. On top of that, we scanned and we saw that there appeared to be a number of child mothers. So we immediately asked the Border Patrol guards to please pull the child mothers for us, to pull the youngest children for us, and to also pull the children who had been there the longest. When they walked into the room, we were horrified by what we saw because they were dirty. Some of them smelled. Their clothes were dirty. Their faces were dirty. They hadn't brushed their teeth in weeks. Their hair was matted. It was just horrendous. They were visibly ill. They were coughing. They had mucus running down their faces from their nose. They had mucus on their shirts. Some of the breastfeeding child mothers had breast milk on their shirts. It was really, really bad. And then we sat down and we started to talk to the children about where are you sleeping? What are they feeding you? And it just got worse. The one child told us that when he first arrived, there were 300 children in his cell, and that currently there are 100. We were able to verify that with a subsequent roster on Thursday. Other children described 25, 40, 50 children in their cell. As we started to request specific young children, they could not bring them to us because they were too sick. And when we asked to meet with them anyway, they would not let us see the children who were sick. We finally were able to insist that they gave us telephone access to some of the older children who were sick. And they basically described being locked up in isolation, sleeping on mats on the floor, and being fed just horrific food, which is especially problematic for children who are sick. On top of that, the children who were sick reported that there was really nobody taking care of them. So we had an infant who was sick, and the child mother went in there to take care of her infant because there was no one else to do it. She got the flu severely. They took the infant away from her and gave the infant to an unrelated child and asked her to take care of this girl's infant. So it just was a disaster, and from every single perspective.
Now, after you saw them, there's subsequently been an appearance before a judge, a panel of judges. The government defended some of this, explaining that providing toothpaste, soap, and even sleep isn't necessarily a requirement. Can you explain that?
No. Can you?
I can't.
I mean, what parent in America thinks it's okay to have children overnight and not give them access to soap, toothpaste, towels, bedding? Like, these children are literally sleeping on concrete floors, concrete blocks. There are open toilets in the room, in the cells, where these children are sleeping, eating, spending the day after day, and they have no access to soap except for when they shower, which is almost never.
So help us understand, what is the law? I mean, as you interpret it, what should the government be doing in this situation? Sorry, did you lose me for a moment? Can you hear me?
I did lose you. Yes. What did you ask?
Hi, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
What is the law as you interpret it, and what should happen for these children at this point?
Well, at first, to start with, the law is that you're supposed to keep families together. And so last year there was a court case, Mizell, which was the ACLU's case on behalf of the parents who were separated from the children. And that judge found that there is a constitutional right to family integrity under the U.S. Constitution, and that parents who are separated from their children, their constitutional rights are being violated. What we saw is several children who had been separated from their parents, but we also saw many, many children who had been separated from their families. So older brothers and sisters who came to the U.S. with them, aunts, uncles, grandmothers.
Isn't there also a rule that says even if there's once separated or if alone, they must be released within 72 hours?
So that is another law, and that law is found in the TVRPA. So basically the Trafficking Victims Act that the president is asking Congress to amend. But that says that a child is not supposed to be in Border Patrol facilities for more than 72 hours. The idea is that these are adult facilities and you got to get the kids out of there as soon as possible, get them with the Office of Refugee Resettlement and reunify them with their families, because approximately half of these children have parents in the United States. Another almost 30% have family in the United States where the children can be placed. And there's only about 12% who need to be in government care. So really, this is all about getting these children back to their families as quickly as possible. And that
which used to be the policy, and it's changed.
No, that is still the policy. They are still required to be placing children with their families and to do it quickly.
What's their stated justification for not doing it?
They say they're overwhelmed, but it makes no sense. We are nowhere near the highest number of apprehensions that we've had over the last few decades. What we have instead is that they are holding on to children illegally far longer than they are allowed to under the Flores conditions, and it's costing the American taxpayers $775 per day per child to keep them in these facilities, which is outrageous because almost all of them have families.
So may I ask a question that is difficult to even consider, but is this in part a decision to make conditions so horrifying it deters people from crossing the border?
So here's the problem. I believe in the inherent goodness of people. And so it's hard for me to think that they are doing these horrific things to these innocent children for political reasons. But what I can tell you is that there is no question that in policy documents released by this administration, that they are trying to make detention conditions worse as a deterrent to people coming here. But what's happening is, I don't want to believe that they're trying to hurt these children. But what I can tell you is that the children are being hurt as a consequence of that. And also, and very importantly, as a consequence of mismanagement. That basically, they have 12,000 beds for these children, and that each individual child only needs to be there for a few days, just enough time to call the parent and to run a background check on the parent. Once that's done, the child should be out of these facilities. And this isn't the Border Patrol facilities where the children should only be, if at all, for a few hours. These are the ORR facilities that they should only be in. So basically, they come into Border Patrol custody, the Border Patrol notifies ORR, and ORR is immediately supposed to send someone to pick the child up and place them in a facility that's child appropriate, where they can focus on reunifying the child with the family, and it's not happening. And they're saying it for lack of beds, but there are 12,000 beds.
So I've been asked this. People are messaging me on Instagram saying, well, I've heard that it's because Congress hasn't approved a bill to increase funding for these facilities, and that really what they need is more funding, and Congress needs to move. You say what to that?
I say that's nonsense. They are not supposed to have these children. The Border Patrol stations are not supposed to have these children, so they don't need funding to keep children there, because the children don't belong there. The children have never belonged there. They don't need more funding for ORR because the children are being kept there for sometimes over 9 months, and it's supposed to be a maximum of 20 days that a child is supposed to be there. The complex cases are supposed to be resolved in 20 days, and they're not. So basically what they're doing is they're wasting the money they have, and they're creating a financial shortage because of their mismanagement of the funds and of the children's placements, which is supposed to be with their parents.
So the question I keep getting is, what can people do? How can they help?
So first and foremost, every American, every person in this country needs to get on the phone to Capitol Hill and say, get these children out of these Border Patrol stations. These children are literally dying. This is not an exaggeration. They are literally dying. Now, in addition to that, what Congress needs to do is it needs to focus solely on passing legislation that sets clear standards for the care of these children, to make clear that the children need soap, that the children need toothpaste. We shouldn't have to spell these things out, but it's become clear that we do. We have an entire team of pediatric experts from Harvard, Stanford, all over the country who are making themselves available to Congress on a pro bono basis, and that will help them to draft that legislation so that it's research based and evidence based and research informed, And then what we need from this administration is we need new management in this office. We need heads to roll. They need to get these kids out of the Border Patrol facilities, and they need to put them in an ORR, and they need to put people in charge of an ORR who can process these children quickly and get them back with their families right away.
Okay, I'm going to ask you if we can, after this, write this down, and I'll post it on my gallery and Instagram so that people can see what steps they can take. But I just would ask you to repeat again. I hear a lot of times people think, well, my congressperson isn't anywhere near Texas. I don't live anywhere near Texas or the border, so if I call my congressperson, it doesn't matter. You say what to that?
I say that every congressional person, every member of Congress has the ability to get involved in this. You do not have to live in Texas. Jeff Merkley has been involved in trying to get a little girl out of this facility. This little girl was in a distraught state every single time that we saw her. She was experiencing so much trauma. The parents are not in his district. The Border Patrol facility is not in his district, and he and his staff have spent hours on the phone and on email.
Call your member where you live.
Wherever they are.
And may I ask you, are you a political operative? Is this because you care about one side winning in an election?
No, I've been a Republican. I have been a Democrat. It's like I am so moderate that like I go back and forth between the parties. And you can look at my voting record to see that. Sometimes I vote red, sometimes I vote blue, sometimes I vote green. It depends on the election and the issues. What I always vote is kids. I vote kids, Jessica.
How does this compare to other times you visited other facilities? And you've done it for how long now?
This is my third year of visiting the facilities.
Yep. Okay. Yep. Flores has been around for 20. You've done it for 3. So, yes. And how does it compare to what you've seen in the past?
Well, I've never seen anything like this. Certainly, Border Patrol facilities are horrific places already. But what was truly different about this facility was the hundreds of children who were being warehoused there. Something that I didn't explain earlier, I told you that there was supposed to be a maximum capacity of 104. But when we saw that they had over 350 children there, we asked them about that, and they said that they had recently expanded the facility, and we couldn't find any building, any part of the building that had been expanded. So after we were done interviewing on Monday, we drove around the facility, and we saw a cheap metal warehouse that appeared to have recently been erected on the property with no windows. And we thought they couldn't possibly be in this warehouse. And in fact, we talked to the Border Patrol the next day, and we also talked to the children, and they confirmed that in fact there were over 100 children right there and then in that warehouse.
I'm going to let you go. I'm going to ask you one last thing. Would you repeat for us, if people call their member of Congress from their district, what again should they ask of them?
They need to ask them to get every single child out of U.S. Border Patrol facilities. They need to tell Congress to pass legislation that sets appropriate standards for the care of children in U.S. custody. We need to make sure that not a single child dies.
Professor, thank you for the work you do. Thank you for sharing this with us. I'd love to have you back on before one of the debates to sort of reset this before we hear some of the presidential hopefuls share their policy ideas.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you. I'm grateful. We'll be in touch.
Me too. Bye.
Bye. So to just recap what you heard, Professor Binford is a law professor, and she knows the law. She's been visiting these facilities for some 3 years, and she says the conditions in which these children are being held is the worst she's seen in her experience. It is inhumane. She has described a situation where the kids are sleeping on concrete. They have no blankets. They have no toothpaste. They have no soap. In many cases, they're unable to sleep. They are being warehoused in groups of what can only be described as overcrowding. And by her analysis, this is not legal. So we have laws that prevent this kind of treatment of people. And in fact, there are ways to address this right now. There are provisions for this. We have the means. Yes, Congress can act in certain capacities, and our government can also be doing things right now. So her suggestion is you can call your members of Congress and just ask them to take action and do what is lawful at this point and have these children released according to the law to guardians or proper facilities. I'm going to post this, and so that you can share it, hopefully, if we can get that to work, right? And I'll post something in the gallery so you know what you can tell your members.